Deep inside everyone's skull, there is an ancient monster locked away. It has no interest in the rules of survival. Its only food is pure pleasure. In 1953, psychologist James Olds stumbled onto the key that would wake it. Because of one small mistake, an electrode meant for the brainstem ended up in the septal area of a rat's brain. Once the experiment began, something strange happened. When Olds pressed the button and gave the rat a mild shock, it happened to be sitting in one corner of the test bench. After that, the rat became obsessed, kept going back to that spot as if it was waiting for something. Olds realized something sharp. He may have accidentally found a switch that creates reward directly inside the skull. He quickly refined the experiment. Inside a box, he installed a lever. Every time the rat pressed it, it triggered a self-stimulation. And that is how science got its most tragic addict. The rat went completely mad. It pressed the lever thousands of times an hour, over and over, without stopping. It gave up food, ignored sleep, and was even willing to cross an electrified grid just to get that same intracranial high again and again. It became a prisoner who chose to die for pleasure. Left alone, it would have kept stimulating itself until it collapsed and died. What Olds had found was the brain's reward center. And in an almost cruel way, it proved that once you wake the most primitive pursuit of pure pleasure, even the instinct to survive can be abandoned. This rebellion inside an iron cage was not an isolated case. Years later, American psychiatrist Robert Heath implanted electrodes into human patients' brains. A patient known only as B19, once given the button, reported ecstasy like nothing before. When the stimulation stopped, he protested fiercely, begging for just a few more. So what exactly is this button, the one that can make a creature happy right up until death? At first, every clue pointed to dopamine. Scientists found that, whether it was a rat pressing a lever or opium and other addictive drugs, both worked through the nucleus accumbens, releasing a flood of dopamine. For a while, dopamine was crowned the molecule of happiness, and addiction seemed to be nothing but a greedy chase after the pleasure it made. But then, in 1997, when Wolfram Schultz pointed an electrode at a monkey's brain, he accidentally exposed the whole scam. In an experiment where a light mint juice was coming, he found that when the monkey first tasted the juice by surprise, its dopamine neurons fired with excitement. But once the monkey learned the pattern, by the time it actually drank the juice, the dopamine neurons went completely silent. Instead, the moment the light's signaling reward turned on, dopamine surged early, ahead of time. And if, after the light, the expected juice never came, dopamine crashed instantly, as if expressing a kind of neural disappointment. Schultz realized, dopamine is not happiness itself. It is a prediction about happiness. It encodes reward prediction error. When reality beats expectation, it fires hard, driving us to learn how to get that surprise again. And when reality falls short, it punishes us with silence. It is not a hedonist. It is a strict teacher. Its job is to make sure we learn to survive as efficiently as possible, not to let us wallow in pleasure itself. Then, another scientist, Berridge, uncovered another accomplice in this rebellion. He found that the brain's reward system actually holds two very different parts, liking and wanting. Dopamine is the fuel of wanting, but the real pleasure of liking comes more from endorphins and other opioids. Which means that at the core of addiction lies a wanting that has viciously split from liking. When drugs keep hitting the brain, the dopamine system grows abnormally sensitive, blowing, wanting up to a pathological level, while the brain's liking system gradually goes numb. So the same dose of the drug brings less pleasure, weaker and weaker. So addicts fall into a terrible paradox. They want the thing desperately, even though it can no longer bring them much pleasure at all. What they're chasing is no longer happiness. It's a dopamine-driven, never-satisfied illusion of desire. So addiction isn't a simple tyrant of pleasure. It's a calculating manipulator. It hijacks our brain's oldest learning mechanism and traps us in a reinforcement loop we cannot escape. And the battlefield of this rebellion has long since spread beyond drugs into every corner of our lives. Slot machines and casinos use uncertain rewards to keep us hooked on the hope that we'll win next time. And in our phones, every like, every scroll is one more microdose of dopamine injected straight in. It keeps us locked to the screen, trapping us in an endless loop of wanting, while we rarely feel the real liking and satisfaction underneath. And if addiction is a rebellion driven by brain mechanisms, then is there any way out at all? In 1981, an experiment by Bruce Alexander offered a ray of hope. He believed the earlier experiments themselves were a form of torture, so he built what became known as Rat Park. This paradise had warm sawdust, colorful toys, playful companions, and plenty of food. Then, he gave the rats two choices: plain water and sugar water laced with morphine. Unlike the rats that shocked themselves willingly, he got the exact opposite result. The rats living in the paradise barely cared about the morphine water. They preferred socializing, playing, and exploring. And when Alexander took the rats that were addicted to morphine in isolated cages and moved them into the paradise, most of them gradually gave up morphine and returned to a normal life. On top of that, studies of soldiers returning from Vietnam offered similar proof. Under the pressure and boredom of the Vietnam battlefield, nearly 20% of U.S. soldiers became addicted to heroin, but once they came home, over 90% of them quit without any formal treatment, naturally on their own. Which means addiction, environment, and social connection are tied closely to whether life feels meaningful. More often than not, addiction is a symptom. It's a cry for help, hiding loneliness, trauma, or despair underneath. When real life is full of pain and numbness, the brain instinctively reaches for anything that offers a moment of relief, whether chemical or behavioral. Yet our modern narrative often chooses to forget this. Selectively, we obsess over dopamine detox methods, willpower training, efficient self-discipline hacks, even pin our ultimate hopes on medication, or even more precise brain surgery. All of it neatly shifts the blame back onto the individual struggling inside the cage, as if addiction were just his own brain malfunctioning. And that, in itself, is a more hidden kind of addiction. We become addicted to personal solutions because they promise a simple, controllable future, one that lets us ignore. The harder question underneath, how much of the modern society we live in is really, in some deep sense, a beautifully decorated Skinner box? When stable communities fall apart, when work loses its meaning, when consumerism keeps manufacturing wants that can never be satisfied, aren't all of us, to some degree, becoming rats locked alone in a cage? And so, our real struggle with desire may not be just individual. It may live in the world we all share. Freeing the prisoner of pleasure won't ultimately come from better drugs or a stronger will. It will come from a deeper question about society. How do we stop building these invisible cages and rebuild for each other a human paradise that holds liking and nourishes meaning?